Hi. This video is just looking at Chris Hedges' article in Truthdig, which I was waiting for some sort of statement from him after the Charlottesville horror, and he's come out with this article which was published on August the 27th about how Antifa mirrors the alt-right, which basically Antifa is what the so-called alt-left, which is an extreme reaction to the extreme alt-right, and that's what happens with extremism. You'll get an extremist faction, so you've got your extremist Muslims that then create extremist anti-Muslims who are often every bit as hateful as the enemy that they claim to be fighting against, when the actual fact is that extremist Muslims are they pose the biggest threat actually to Muslim people, but what happens is that non-extremist Muslim people end up getting targeted by the extremist so-called alt-left or anti-Islamics, but they're called the alternative right. Okay, but I mean, I like Chris Hedges, but I'm having misgivings about a lot of these people at the moment that are very highly celebrated by the so-called alternative media. People like Chumpsky and Chris Hedges. I know he's very enamoured of Chumpsky, who is an ignorant git, and that's all I can say about him, because he deserves to be called an ignorant git, because he's supposed to be, apparently the highest intelligence that everybody listens to, his every word, people are hanging on his every word because he's so intelligent, because he's read so many books at Harvard. It's like just so disgusting that you've got this sort of intelligent elite comprised of people, many of whom their feet have never so much as touched the ground in terms of living the real reality of the world that they comment on. I think Chumpsky did get arrested a couple of times, in the 60s, but he certainly profited from that. So in this sense, Chris Hedges, he's right in one sense that extremes do support each other, but in another sense, I was quite disgusted to see that he'd done this article that was basically heavily criticising the left, as if the so-called left were responsible for the violence caused by the extreme right, the alt-right, when in actual fact the truth is that if extremists are coming into your city and they are the kind of people that want to kill Jews and Muslims and have the power and freedom to lynch black people who hanker for an evil history past where black people were slaves, and in fact you could enslave anybody you liked really, and women had no rights, then yes, if the people of that city did not come out in full force and stand up against those people to say, I'm very sorry, you are not welcome in our city with your extremist hate, then that would be a loud statement from the people in the city, wouldn't it? Because silence equals consent. And we know all about Chomsky's manufacturing consent, don't we? So no, I disagree with Chris Hedges here. I think it was totally wrong to come out, especially as he's somebody who's, you know, written books about Christian fascism and all this kind of stuff, and the alt-right, and making his speeches against Trump, and then these people actually kill an innocent woman and seriously injure people as well, because apparently they should have freedom to speak. Well, no, they should not have freedom to speak, because freedom, if there's no respect, there's no freedom. Where there's no respect, there's no freedom. And people who are speaking without respect for the truth and balance and justice, well, they have no right to speak, because whatever they speak, therefore, is against truth, justice, and what is right. And, you know, I'm sick of these people. Look, you're an intelligent guy, Chris Hedges. I like you as a human being. I know that in your heart you're a good human being. But the problem is that people think that they've reached a plateau and they can just stay there. Well, you can't, because new knowledge is coming to light all the time, new understanding, and it's coming from the street people, okay, who have survived from the very bottom of this world, and physically and psychologically face the realities, the very worst realities of this world. And I'm one of those people who, by some fortune in life, is able to get an education and also be able to articulate what I understand and assimilate knowledge and facts without getting carried away by them or sailing off on some bloody ego trip. Okay, and I'm not saying that Chris Hedges is sailing off on an ego trip, but I do think, as I say, his approach to what's happened in Charlottesville really is totally wrong, because he, first of all, just by using the language that has been delivered by this New World Order and its media, such as the alt-right and the extreme left, and all this stuff about left and right politics, you people at the top who people listen to, okay, you need to start speaking in real language, okay, in real terms, because this word right, the whole agenda is confusing to the mind. People are told that right is good, right is with God, right is mine, and so they're called the people who are totally wrong, who are most wrong in this world, are being called right. It's a bastardisation of the word, and it bastardizes people's thinking, and it does cause confusion in a very subliminal way, in a very fundamental subliminal way. I've explained in previous videos, and especially in my one to Chumpsky on linguistics, that these words have a power over human consciousness. They cast a spell over human consciousness, and human consciousness is under the spell of this idea that the very worst and most wrong people are right, and that the people on the side of truth and justice and equality, oh, they're left, which has its connotations. You know, it was only, what, 50, 60 years ago, children in fact, less than that. I know people of 40 odd in Britain who were getting their hands hit with a ruler for writing with their left hand. It's where the word sinister comes from. Sinister applied to people of the left hand. There was this idea in human consciousness throughout Europe for hundreds of years that anybody who used the left hand was somehow associated with the devil, that there was something evil about them. And that's why children were being stopped from writing with their left hand in schools. People were punished for being left-handed. It's only in recent years that we've lost that. You know, it's a very young part of human consciousness now that we no longer discriminate against left-handed people. We no longer judge them evil. But that is a very small part of our history. Okay, that is what, a second in our historical period, because for over an hour our history has been condemning left-hand people, and the left to this day, and now that extremism, that extremist approach, that evil judgment that was based on absolutely nothing except myth and fantasy, magical thinking, as Chris Hedges calls it, quite rightly, okay? Now, instead of it being applied to individuals who use their left hand predominantly, now it's applied, it's been moved up into the sphere of politics. And just by this very process of discussing the alt-right and the alt-left, as he says, so-called alt-left, is to continue to promote and spread the propaganda. So this whole article that Chris Hedges has presented here is itself based entirely on propaganda. A propaganda that's become normalised to the extent that people still call wrong people who stand against our human rights, who support the idea of racial supremacy, people who think that women shouldn't have rights, people who think children shouldn't have rights, people who want to batter children, even though we know now without any shadow of a doubt that battering children does not create very nice adults. It creates damaged adults. Battering children isn't a correct way. It's not a right way forward. But these people, you know, that's what they want to do. And that's what fascism is. Fascism is maligned thinking. It's power seeking. It seeks to empower a few individuals who then get to satisfy their depraved lusts and fantasies within the lawless society that they establish as under their law. You know, there's a law to keep the people down and denied their rights, and that same law protects the oppressors. The wrongs, okay? They're wrongs. They're not right. We need to, in order to change things in this world, the first thing that we need to change is the words that we are using, because that is where the spell is being cast. That's where the spells are being cast. And we do need a revolution in language. And I asked Chris Hedges, please watch my video, and I'll leave the link under this, educating Chumpsky on linguistics, about the words ignorance and ignorant. That is a fundamental word that has influenced human consciousness and did empower the bastardisation of that word, the corruption of the interpretation, the definitions given for ignorance and ignorant, the corruption there. That is what empowered the Western elites to just go on a rampage throughout Africa America, you know, every nation that was colonised. People were just murdered. I mean, we hear about the conquistadors, okay, and how when they arrived into South America, some of the leaders, cultures that they came across there, you know, they were engaged in mass slaughter, and there was, you know, mass blood spilling, and people, you know, apparently the conquistadors were disgusted, really. And so, why were they disgusted? Because what the West did was 100 times, 1,000 times worse than what they were doing. Yes, it was disgusting. Their leaders had gone completely insane and believed that it was the end of the world, and in order to stop the end of the world they had to have this mass blood sacrifice, and everybody knows it was completely ridiculous, and even the people at that time. And that's why they did help the Spanish conquistadors to get rid of those leaders. But what the people didn't realise was that the Spanish conquistadors, like the rest of the Western world that they came from, lives exactly by the same philosophy, because that is exactly what they're doing now, isn't it? They want to end this world, and they're going to do it with mass slaughter. They are doing it with mass slaughter. It's just there. It's not all like presented to us as part of a religious cult, but it is a religious cult. We're dealing with Zionists, a philosophy based on a usurpation of the Judaic faith. And I do stand with the Orthodox Jews, the true Torah Jews, who stand against Zionism as an affront and an abomination of their faith. And yet, even to them, I would say, you people do also need to step into the 21st century. You've got many oppressive practices, especially against women and children, that do need to be abandoned now. You know, we've got to live by new knowledge, as the Quran rightly says. But again, we know that this Islamic extremism is favoured by the West because it totally oppresses the truth of the Quran that liberates Muslims into the 21st century. And it's exactly the same, you know, with the true Torah Jews who cling still to their antiquated interpretations of their holy scriptures and the prophecies, and actually the very fact that they cling to those then pushes a lot of Jewish women into Zionism, because Zionism appears to favour those women. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But we need to all lose our oppressive practices. Every single faith has got to change. And even as it says, you know, in the scriptures, which I only know them from our Bible, which I know is very corrupted, but having witnessed universal light, I can very clearly see what's what and what's been added to and what's been messed with. And I do understand, you know, that as it says in the original prophecies, even the prophets shall be admonished. But that's not in order to punish them and say, oh, you're evil. It's because we've all done wrong things. We've all thought wrong things, that when the truth shines, suddenly we understand it. The problem is that people don't want to be wrong. Their egos don't like it. And also because we've been indoctrinated to be afraid of being wrong, because being wrong means you're going to get punished. But no, being wrong is a punishment. It is a punishment. We all know that if you do stupid things, you're going to get hurt. If you're going to go speeding up and down the motorway on a motorbike, weaving about from lane to lane, then it's very likely you're going to be involved in a serious accident. That is the punishment, isn't it? If you ignore the law of gravity, just walk off a cliff, you're going to fall to the bottom and probably end up dying or be very badly injured. It isn't that God has decided to punish you because you've done a wrong thing. Wrong things create more wrong things. And as I say, this idea, alt-right, please, please stop calling them the alt-right. Please take part in the revolution, Chris Hedges, and all of your ilk. Get with reality. Understand. And yeah, it's easy to dismiss me, isn't it? Who am I? I'm not Noam Chomsky. I've not been to Harvard. No, I just survived extreme poverty and abuse and oppression. And still don't hate. But I do hate the hate. I do. And I do know that there are people. What we need to understand, and I think what Chris Hedges needs to make clear as well, is that in this world there are people who, for whatever reason, enjoy hating. They want to hate somebody. They want freedom to go and batter people and to rape women and to hurt children. Those are the things they enjoy. It's difficult for people, sane people, to understand it, but that's the fact of it. We know they're there, and people will use any excuse that they can. And so that's why the so-called alt-right, which I call alt-wrong, okay? Alt-wrong. They will join the alt-wrongs because they openly wish and support the idea that, you know, black people should be slaves and Muslims are all evil and we should kick them all out of the country and surround America in a great big wall. Well, it's a pity, isn't it, that we can't put a great big wall around Japan, around Fukushima, and stop its filth from entering our Pacific Ocean and air, isn't it, and lands. It's a pity we can't put a great big wall around the Federal Reserve Zionist World Banks, isn't it, to stop them corrupting our societies with their filthy, disgusting money supply. Because words are beyond walls. It isn't really the people. If we get the language right, then the thinking will be right. But if you don't get the language right, then the thinking is going to be wrong. And people will take part. The evil people, so-called, the people who really do just want to kill and damage property and just basically have freedom to participate in anarchy, that the alt-wrong seems to give them that freedom to become anarchistic in really the truest sense of that word, though I do know the origins of anarchy, which really is the opposite. But the fact of it is that people will join that, and I witnessed it in the animal rights movement, where people will join that movement purely because they had a bit of aggression and anger inside them, you know. And one person has admitted it to me, that that was the attraction for him, was that he had a lot of anger in him and he felt he could, you know, that could be liberated and satisfied by getting part in animal rights. He was justified with his anger. And so a world that's based on wrong thinking, using wrong words that's under the spell of wrong words is going to produce angry people who will then seek outlets, and some will move on to the alt-wrong, and some will move on to the what I would call right thinking, which is now called left thinking. So we've got right thinking and wrong thinking. We haven't got left and right politics, because the right politics are wrong and the left politics are generally right. And until we sort that out, until we refuse to call the wrongs right, nothing is ever going to change. Nothing is ever going to change. And this idea of an alt-left, well, what is an alt-left? Because, you know, I mean, I keep hearing Stalin and communism bandied about, and socialism, and oh, this is what the New World Order wants to impose on us. Socialism. It isn't socialism. They want to impose corporate communism. Communism never was socialism. It's a bastardisation of our natural human ability to socialise. It's a fundamental feature of humanity, is our socialism. And we've been robbed of it because they politicised it and knowingly turned it into an extremist cult of communism, of Soviet communism. That we know, anybody knows that that wasn't socialism, because what it was a fascist dictatorship under the banner of socialism. And then we've got the so-called alt-left, the political left in countries like Britain and America, where what have we got? Have we really got a right there, as I would call the right stroke left? No, we've got a covert right, haven't we? The covert wrongs. That's what we've got. Hillary Clinton, covert wrong. Obama, covert wrong. New Labour here in Britain, covert wrong. They weren't right, stroke left. So get rid of the right and left, because it's totally upside down. And until we use the right language and use the right words to describe the truth, that's when the truth will hit home. And it is time to stop calling the right, the political right. It is time to start calling a spade a spade. They're not right, they are wrong. And the people who are standing against the wrong people's rights to deny our rights, we're right. We're not left, we're right. So that is what I would have liked to have heard from you, Chris Hedges. And, you know, then we've got articles like this here, what's wrong with Chris Hedges' view that Antifa mirrors the alt-right, and they're criticising it, which is fair enough, you know. I'll leave you the links, but again, it's totally missing the point, because they're still talking in the same language of right and left politics. And as I say, it needs to be eradicated. It needs to be abandoned. In the same way that we need to correctly define the words ignorance and ignorant in our dictionaries, because those words do not include not knowing, okay? Because not to know something is to be mystified, and it's the duty of those who know to inform the mystified, and the mystified then have a duty to accept the truth if it can be proven as a fact. And those who don't, who refuse to accept the truth, they are ignorant, because they know, but they've chosen to ignore. And that's why ignorance is no defence in law, because nobody has a right to ignore the law. And that's why these are not right, because they ignore our human rights, they ignore universal law, they are wrong. And the people who are called left, which did traditionally, we know, as I've just explained, meant wrong, sinister, of the darkness, devil, left-handedness, okay? No, we're not from there. We're right. We're right. And the right people had a right and a duty to come out and stand up against the wrongs who celebrate people who supported slavery. And that is disgusting in our modern world. It would be no different than people walking through the streets demanding a return to witch hunts and, you know, burning women at the stake as witches. Well, it wasn't just women either, it was men and even children. And this is the kind of extremism you get when a consciousness is cultured under the spells of words and a totally wrong use of words. It is a totally wrong use of a word, you know, to call people like David Cameron the right of Britain, the right-wing politics of Britain. It's just so disgusting. It's fundamentally wrong. When the people who are being called right are wrong. And it is very confusing for children growing up within that consciousness. You know, this sword, this bloody sword here, it is meant to uphold the law, the right, okay? Our rights, universal law, that's what it's meant to uphold. When the scales, that is why justice has a sword and scales, because when the scales go out of balance, the sword falls. Regardless of who it is, but no, we don't live in that kind of world, do we? There is no law. Because the richest people can tilt the scales as much as they bloody like. And they've got control of the sword that will only fall on the people who do the slightest wrong. You know, they get caught with what they've said is an illegal plant. I mean, the very fact that a human consciousness can accept that a plant that we've used for thousands and thousands of years can be criminalised. It's ridiculous. But that's where we're at. But in truth, the sword of light, universal law, it falls regardless. That's why justice is blindfold, because it knows no favour to any individual. It favours every individual, because that's why it's there to protect us, to uphold and defend our rights, to be right, to live right, to be good and happy. And anybody who tries to deny us those rights and stand against it, they will tilt the balance and the sword will fall. The law will come down on them. And in a lawful world, nobody is above the law. We're not in a lawful world. We're in an unlawful world being governed by crazy, mad people who are following the Roman blueprint. And I've shared this in my videos before, you know, about how the Roman Empire, on which our culture is built, this whole world order is built on this consciousness, which was unique in Europe at the time, in the sense that it persecuted women, it kept slaves, robbed people of the rights. Okay, why? Because they were all Crazy, crazy people, poisoned with lead. The rich even used to drink lead wine. On top of drinking the lead pipe water, they were drinking lead sweetened wine and also treating themselves with mercury as a medicine. They were completely crazy. Only a crazy culture could have had that arena of death, which to this day continues to be glorified within Western consciousness. It's time to get rid of these things. It's time to move on. It's time to wake up. So, you know, please, Chris Hedges, I do implore with you to think about what I'm sharing here and to accept that we can no longer use the language that has been imposed on us to describe where people are at, you know, because the alt-rights and the rights are wrong and the lefts are right, and we need to start using that language, and that is when things will change. As it says in the Bible, in the beginning there was the void, and then there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God said, let there be light. So, you know, start with the words.